My name is Don White. I was born in 1924, August the 9th, in Oshawa, Ontario, Canada. Right now, I'm 97. Well, I was pretty young when the war broke out, and I really didn't have anything really planned for my life. Well, and I loved playing hockey. You'd find a pond somewhere in somebody's field and shovel the snow off and put 2 boots down for goal posts, and quite often if we couldn't find a puck or we lost the puck, there was still horses around, and a little bit of horse manure frozen did pretty good as a puck. Spring of 41, I joined the militia at 16 here in Oshawa and went to military camp in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And then in 43, when I turned 18, I joined the regular army and I got sent out to Dundurn, Saskatchewan for my training. Training was finished and the draft came up for overseas, and then we boarded the ship, and it was in Halifax, and it was the Ile-de-France. We were zigzagging all over the ocean to avoid the submarines. We were crammed on like sardines. When you went to sleep at night, there was a layer of us on the floor, and then a layer of us on the tables in the dining room, and a layer in hammocks up above. And we sailed over and landed in Scotland and got on a train and went down to the middle part of England, and we went to a town called Woking, which is about 30, 40 miles west outside of London, and trained there. I was there for maybe month or 2 months. This was early 44. And then I got on the ship and they sent us down to Italy and landed at Naples, and was in Naples for about a day. A truck came in and transported me across over to the Adriatic, and then that's when I joined the regiment, the Royal Canadian Dragoons. First I was in number 5 troop, Recce, and then I was only there for a couple of weeks, and then they transferred to number 1 troop, Recce, and that's where I stayed till the war ended. My rank was trooper. Our bivvy was reconnaissance. We were in, a squadron was comprised of 5 Recce troops, a heavy troop, an assault troop, and headquarters troop. Each Recce troop had 2 staghounds, which are armored cars. They had a turret, and they were 5 man, and it's a 4-wheel drive, and it dangled along 50, 60 mile an hour if you went full out, which we never did, but you could. And it was automatic, it was gas, and there was a driver and a co-driver, and the co-driver had a machine gun. And then there was a turret, and 3 of us were in the turret, the crew commander, and the gunner, and then the loader operator. When you weren't in action, your head was out the turret, the same as the crew commander, observing whatever you could observe to make sure you didn't get into trouble if you didn't have to. And then the little dingoes, they were 2 man, and they're made in England by the Daimler Company. And they were made out of battleship armored plate, and they had a driver and a gunner, just a machine gun. And they could go as fast in reverse as they could forward, but don't try to go too fast going backwards, because a few of them got tipped over, because it's hard to steer going backwards compared to going forward. But we had 2 of those and 2 big ones in each troop, and we worked pretty good together. See these little mufflers in the back end here? Well, we used to take a hole in the beans or the stew and put them on top of the muffler, and we'd get hot beans or hot stew. That regiment had been in action since they landed in Sicily, and I was a recruit and hadn't seen any action, so they were very skeptical of me. And I was kind of treated more as an outsider. And I was treated that way for about maybe 2 weeks. They asked for 5 volunteers for the night patrol, and I volunteered. When I went out of the night patrol, well, we went up through a vineyard. The dang moon was out. And next thing we know, a machine gun opened up. So we hunkered down in the vineyard in a little kind of depression, because in there we were out of sight of the Germans, so they quit firing. Then we started again, and then we got fired on. And then, by the grace of God, a great big cloud came and went over the moon, and there was no moon, and the light was pretty poor. We turned around and got out and reported back to where they were. And when we came back, I was one of the boys. So I got along great after that. I was part of the regiment then. So just one day, I suppose, late November, early December, we were ordered up to take over a group of Italian farm buildings. Well, we get up there, and they were going to put 3 slit trenches out in front of the buildings for our defense. And a slit trenches, the Americans call them foxholes. We call them slit trenches. So 2 guys go out and we dig our slit trench. And then we got relieved and went back into the buildings, got a little bit of sleep. In the middle of the night, I was woken up, time to go back up into the slit trench. And I jump into the slit trench, and I thought I was never coming to the bottom. A fellow by the name of Lance Corporal Boogie Wilkinson, who was 6'6", took over our trenches. When he got in, he was only a little up to his chest, so he dug it so he could see out. But when I jumped into it, I couldn't even see out, so I spent the next hour digging a little step so I could see out of the slit trench. So that kept me warm for a little while. So Christmas Eve rolled around, and what do we hear? Noise over in the German sector. Later on in the evening, it was just before dark, and we couldn't figure out what the noise was, but we got alerted. They figured maybe there's something going to happen. So we kind of listened, and then all of a sudden we kind of heard more. And here the Germans were singing Christmas carols. Well, we kind of looked at each other and said, we can't let them outdo us. So we all started to sing Christmas carols, and I think for about the next hour, we were competing each other who could sing the loudest Christmas carols. And that's how I spent 1944 Christmas Eve. Well, my recollection is it wasn't very nice. To start with, the weather was just on the verge of freezing. That some odd time it would freeze, but most of the time it was just above freezing. First time we were set up as infantry again because the line was static. And you're single file, 3-4 feet apart. And we were going along the side of the road, and all of a sudden, first shell I heard, and I heard this shell coming. Next thing, I was in the ditch with my nose in the dirt. The shell went way overhead and landed way behind us. Well, I looked up, and all the guys were up there at the top looking at me, laughing their heads off. Because if you've been in action any length of time, you can tell by the sound of the shell where it's going to land. And they knew it wasn't going to land anywhere near us, but they had a good laugh at my expense. I managed to get I think it was a 5 or 6 day leave. Only time I really got a leave. So I decided to go and see Rome. And I was wandering down the street, and who do I see? A fella coming up the other way by the name of Fred Taylor, who I went to school with in Oshawa here. And who do we see? Another guy coming. It was George Tomlinson, another guy that we went to school with. So the three of us had about 2 days in Rome, reminiscing and enjoying the sights of Rome. And I couldn't believe it to this day how 2 guys I went to school, 3 of us, would all get together in Rome. All different regiments. It just was unbelievable. We went across the Adriatic, across Italy, went over to Marseille, France. We started out and we drove all the way up through France and into Belgium to a town called Vorslaw. We were sent up into the middle of Holland, and we were just sent up right into action. We didn't waste any time, and we never were pulled back for a rest till the war ended. We had the heavy troop and assault troop in our squadron. An assault troop is like a 10 or 12 man, hardly infantry trained guys. And then the heavy troop was 75 pounders, which is really artillery. So kind of a squadron in our regiment is almost like a little army. We got all the other supports. The Germans were on the retreat, and that was our job, to keep them going and not let them fortify again. And that kept us busy as all get out. But we were fortunate enough to keep nipping at their heels, and they kept retreating enough that we were operating anywhere from 15 to 25 miles ahead of the front every day. And so that meant that you're out in no man's land, and any support is 15, 25 miles away. So this kind of made it very interesting. Yeah, scared a lot of times. I did a lot of praying in the Army. But anyway, it so happened this one day, morning we were getting ready to brekkie, and word came through to headquarters that the Germans were vacating the town of Leeuwarden. And then we proceeded into the town of Leeuwarden. There wasn't anything in sight at all, man or beast, till we got about 2 blocks inside the town, and then a few people came out. Well, before we got 4 blocks in, we couldn't move for people. And it's something that 75 years later, to this day, I can't express the feeling, because they were dancing, they were jumping up and down, they were singing, they were laughing, they were shouting, they were crying. Every emotion you can think of, they were doing. And they wanted to touch you one way or another, shake your hand, clap you on the back. And we got flowers, and it was just unbelievable, the atmosphere in that town at that time. And it's something that to this day I remember. Oh, the trip home. Our regiment was chosen as fatigue troops. So we were the first on the Queen Elizabeth, the big boat. So then we finally got on the train, came up to Toronto, landed at the exhibition grounds, formed up as a regiment, marched into the Coliseum, and my whole family was there. All my mother's sisters and all their families, my cousins, everybody was there. Couldn't believe it. It was, I hardly can describe it. It was just, well, you got Christmas presents at Christmas time you didn't expect. Maybe a feeling like that. You know, it was just so great to be home. And we went to Holton Cemetery, and there's 12 dragoons buried in Holton Cemetery. Visited every one of the 12 and put a poppy and a Canadian flag, and I give them the minute silence respect. All 12 of them. I felt that's something I had to do when I went to the cemetery. I don't want to be held up. I saw, I'm just me, that's all. And take me as I am, don't put me up here when I'm only here. That's all I ask. I think of one word of advice I could give to anybody, that is learn about the word respect. Because if you do, You will respect other people's opinions. And I think maybe the most important thing, if you respect yourself, things will be good.